I'm overcome with emotion of seeing all these people around me and just having doubted that I could actually walk that long and having feared for the last week that my hip wouldn't make it, that I would somehow be incapacitated, to actually get there and get to the moment is just overwhelming. And I can't explain it any other way. It happened and we'd got there.
There is rarely a life untouched by hardship or challenge. On this podcast, we invite our guests to share their very personal stories. We harness the wisdom and resilience of our guests, which has shaped who they are today.
Carl Rogers said, "That which is most personal is in fact most universal." Together we'll be inspired to embrace the resilience in our own stories and to gain strength in the face of adversity and have a few laughs along the way.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
Both Donna and Di were born here on these lands. We are grateful to draw on the culture of telling and sharing stories, and we hope that you will draw inspiration from the stories that are shared here. Today we have another dynamic duo, not just Donna and Di, but we have the lovely Bill and Pina Dunne, a retired couple from Melbourne who are together going to tell us their stories of pilgriming around different Caminos. Pina describes herself in her blog as a teacher, mother, wife, daughter, sister, friend, reader, seeker, traveller, pilgrim. And Bill is a retired teacher. He had a great career in infotech, history, maths and RE. And together their shared interest in retirement has focused around the pilgrims of the Caminos. It's a fascinating story and we hope you'll enjoy not just the story of their adventures and where it's taken them unexpectedly, but also some tips if you wanted to do some of the Caminos as well. Pina has been writing a blog about her adventures since they started their pilgrimages, and that can be found at pindun, PINDUN.wordpress.com. So to find out more about their adventures, do look that up.
Welcome, Bill and Pina, to the Double Ds podcast. It's fantastic to see you in a different environment because I met Bill and Pina very recently. We all did the Camino Salvado pilgrimage hike, which when you say you've done a Camino, people think it's over in Europe, but in actual fact there's one in Western Australia. So it went from Perth in Subiaco to Norcia, about 150 kilometres, and we'll talk about that in the podcast as well. But I met Bill and Pina, and yeah, when you're walking for 7 days straight, you have a lot of time for chatting, and I thought that their story about their Camino journeys would be very interesting for people to listen to. So welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. So Bill, Pina, I've not met you before, and so really looking forward to hearing some of your story, but I'm wondering if some of our listeners might just be wanting to know a bit about you before we talk about walking and hiking and how you got to do Caminos. Tell us a bit about what have you done in your pre-Camino walking lives that you'd love our listeners to know.
Well, we've got 4 children and I think the last child, Maria, when she finished high school and got halfway through university, we felt that we could walk and feel comfortable with things happening, that she didn't need to be, in a sense, looked after, especially going to school, catching trains, getting up early, coming home. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was an opportunity. You didn't need to be around as parents in the same way.
Not in the same way.
That's right.
With number 4, although you never really stop being a parent, do
No,
you?
you don't.
Let's face it.
Don't.
I stopped at 3 children, so you did very well with 4. What about you, Pina? What kind of things were you involved in your career or your life?
Pre-Camino, I suppose you can go that way, is that I was mainly involved with, as Bill said, with the children. Children, mother at home, mum's aged. She lived with us for the good while, 14 years before we eventually had to put her in a home. So it was a 4 children mum job, and that was really all consuming because you
can't think why, Pina. I can't think why.
So when we started thinking about travel, and somehow, somewhere along the line, there must have been a seed in the mind about Caminos and long walks and looking over mountains and whatever. I never thought of the effort that you'd have to go to get on top of the mountain.
But all of that effort that you've done in rearing, 4 kids, looking after your mum. I mean, not many families, I would imagine. I know of only 1 or 2 who have the 3 generations in their home. So was that a normal cultural thing for you, or is that quite unusual?
Possible, yeah. It's quite cultural. The thought never entered anyone's mind that mum would be on her own. I'm a migrant to Australia, so I arrived here when I was 8 years old. I was the youngest of 9, and mum was a widow from, I don't know, she was 54 or something. So we came when she was a widow already. Dad had passed, and her life was her family, and her family wasn't really going to abandon her or anything like that. So it was just a normal thing for us to be happening. It wasn't in position.
Whereabouts did you immigrate from?
I immigrated from Italy, from a little town called Postiglione, which is in the province of Salerno, which is near Naples.
Hence why you've been an Italian teacher, I understand?
Oh, probably, yeah.
Yes.
At the instigation of my mum. So it was a trade-off. Get an education and teach Italian, or not getting an education and then end up doing something else. So I went for the education.
So Pina has revealed on the Camino that she has a rebellious side. I suppose being the youngest of 9, that would explain part of that. Yep. And so Bill mentioned that some years ago you saw the movie The Way.
The Way, yes. I saw The Way. It was it's something that was a bit inspiring. There's another one out just recently, The Way, My Way, which is an Australian version or variation on the same. But The Way was what made it very interesting for us because we recognised a lot of things from the film, and as we were walking, we remembered the film, and we remembered also he sort of went reluctantly, and in a sense we didn't go reluctantly, but we were surprised sometimes at what we came across.
So The Way was about the Camino.
It's about the Camino Frenches.
In Spain?
Yeah.
The one, yeah. And so that's what gave you the idea. Was that right?
That's right. When I retired, suddenly you've got all this time, but also we'd thought about and talked about going on Camino, and I remember going into a travel agent at first, and I thought we were going about 130 kilometres.
Yep.
I said, let's do the Camino, and we'll start at Sarria, which is about 120 kilometres from San Diego, which is the final place where St. James is buried, or his remains are. And then suddenly Pina says from the side, "Oh no, we're not doing that. We're going to do the lot." And
in for a penny, Pina.
Exactly. Like what?
The rebellious side coming out.
That's right. Why? And I said, "Oh, are we?" And then I said, "What about we start from the top of the mountain and make our way down rather than start at the bottom at St. John Pier de Port, which is at the bottom of the Pyrenees Mountains?" "Oh, no, we'll do the lot."
We'll do the lot, yes.
So how long was that first lot that you did?
The first day or two? Or
No. How long was that?
First Camino.
That first Camino, how long was it?
I think it's
789 or 99 kilometres.
Yeah.
Okay, so about 6 times what the original offer was from
Exactly.
Bill, right?
Exactly.
So
never
you
know
go-
what you're getting into when you start something.
But had you done much travelling before that as a family or as a couple?
We travelled, well, our honeymoon was to Europe. So we did 9 weeks for the honeymoon. That was a very long time ago.
So I visited Pina's village
Yeah.
and got to know her culture a bit. And then we went across to
Ireland.
because my background mainly is Irish. My grandparents were Irish and other parts. So when we came across to Ireland, Pina got to know a bit of my culture as well.
But then years, I don't know how many years later, but we also took 3 of the children across to America and Europe and back to Australia. We were away for 3 months.
Yeah, it
About
was
3
good
months.
because the children spent, 2 months?
2 months in school
In
initially.
school in Italy, trying to learn the language and get to know the culture.
But had you done any long hikes or a lot of athletic pursuits before?
None. I'm not sure if I was talking to you, Donna, or someone else on the Camino, that when we first started thinking about Camino, we could hardly make it 20 minutes without being out of breath, going around the block. Like 20 minutes, that was all we could manage.
Wow. So what sort of inspired you to think of taking on nearly 800-kilometre Camino?
You've got to have a certain craziness about you.
And we've got it in spades, right?
Between the two of us, yeah. So I think originally there was a parish group that walked from Portland across to
Pinola.
Yeah, celebrating Mary MacKillop. And what happened was I was driving the bus because I didn't want to walk.
Yeah.
But I was a driver.
What
and
a great plan.
That's right. Unfortunately, the parish priest who organised everything, he twisted his ankle about 3 days in. And so he said he could drive the bus. And so I ended up walking and haven't quite stopped since. That's how it started. Yeah.
And so since then, so you did that first one and then you did the Portland one, I think.
Portugal.
Portugal.
Yeah, the Portuguese.
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. I need to hear about the state of your feet after the first one, going from 20 minutes walking.
Oh, no, we did a lot of practice.
Oh, you did a lot of practice.
We did a lot of practice, probably about 6 months, and we gradually built it up. So we started off, we'd do about 1 kilometre or 2, and then we increased it by about 2 kilometres every 2 weeks.
Right. So by the time you got to the start of the first walk, how sort of far were you going?
We did 2 consecutive days of 17 kilometres.
Right. Okay.
That's what we're up to, and we mixed it up with doing steps or ascents.
Yeah.
But even with all that preparation, the first day, 9 kilometres uphill, up a steep hill, took us a fair number of hours.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between the mountains in Australia and the mountains in the Pyrenees.
There sure are. And at the top, I just collapsed on the grass and I said, "Take me home."
That's right.
On that first day, at the end of the first day, did you think, "Wow, what have we got ourselves in for?" Or did you just think,
no, it was
"Let's
the
just
second
take it"?
day, I think. I remember writing home. I wrote home to someone and I said, "There is not a muscle in my whole body that is not aching at this stage." So it was tough. And we were wondering ourselves at the end of each night whether we'd get through the next day. But we woke up and, got going.
Got going again.
I was surprised how the body can bounce back.
So you just took it day by day,
We
basically.
did, yeah.
Until you walked. How many days did you do for that first one?
We tried to have a rest day probably every week or so, so 1 day break, and it took us 44 days. We're very slow walkers, but 44 days it took us.
But you kept going.
And we kept going.
And how did you feel when you arrived at the end point, which is called?
Santiago de Compostela.
I think Pina should tell this story.
Yes.
We walk in, it seemed ages, and as you approach the end, it's like approaching a finish line of some sort. I know I'm not an athlete. I've not run races, so I'm not sure if the comparison is similar. But as you approach, you kind of feel glad that it's almost over. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, you almost slow yourself down so you don't finish because you're with a bunch of people that you had never thought you'd ever, encounter in your whole life. And yet you've formed a close bond because you've experienced the same aches and the same pains and the same hills. So you're walking in, and as you walk in through the approach from Saria, you can hear in the background this piper. I'm going, what's a piper doing in...
Like a bagpiper.
There was a bagpiper, yeah.
And he's playing these tunes and you kind of enter, you've got a monastery on one side, you've got the cathedral on the other side, and you go through this huge arch, and then this piper doing this music and playing this music. And next to him there's a bunch of American students with signs saying, "Welcome, pilgrims, yay!" And they've got cookies for everybody.
It's delightful.
I mean,
it was
wow.
really good.
Just flowing in specially.
And you start thinking, I'm getting a bit, touched and a bit emotional. You get to the middle of this huge square, and from nowhere, these friends that we'd met, 3 days earlier, 3 or 4 days earlier.
And we'd walk with them for a few days.
Her mum and a daughter rush up to us and embrace us, welcome. And I just melt into, I'm a mess of tears, and I'm overcome with emotion of seeing all these people around me and just having doubted that I could actually walk that long and having feared for the last week that my hip wouldn't make it, that I would somehow be incapacitated to actually get there and get to the moment. It was just overwhelming. And I can't explain it any other way. It happened and we'd got there and...
You managed to do it and you were relieved that it was over.
Yeah, it was a sense of relief. It's kind of a sense of relief too, yeah.
But also I hear in that it's almost like, that can I achieve this? And now I have.
Yes. And it's just you realise how much you have achieved, even though you still don't think it's great. It's much because
it's just another day in a sense. And yet when you get there, the emotions are very powerful and very deep. I was surprised.
And you've talked about the physicality of it, which obviously is the focus, when we think about physical fitness. But what I'm imagining some of the emotion was also about you've said about the bonding of other people, but were there other aspects to the kind of the experience itself? Because it's often associated with quite a spiritual journey, or people take it on for different reasons. But did you have a sense of, that those other reasons that might have been motivating you?
They talk about the Camino as being, Camino is like life. It's a walk through. And they talk about 3 different stages that people go through in a Camino. And the first one's physical. So there's the physical aspect, and often the first week is physical. So you get tired, what I said before about aches and pains, but after a week, it's amazing how the body reacts and comes good. And even though, yes, it's a long day, nonetheless you feel confident that you can get to the end. And so physically it's not an issue. But then you've got time to think about things, and you think about things from the past, think about things from the future. So there's the physical and then there's the mental, and it's, getting up the next day and, we've got the meseta, which is a flat section in the middle of the Camino. And going through there, you think about a lot of things, and they all just sort of emerge as you walking. And
it's more monotonous there too.
It's a bit monotonous.
So you kind of get stir crazy.
So it's not like a meditative sort of state.
Not at this stage.
It's more
not
like,
at this stage.
And so the mental stage is sort of, how do I keep going?
Okay.
How do I keep motivated? Because you can see miles and miles ahead of you and not much to distract you.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that leads to you start to reflect on things that have happened in your life, things that have happened in other people's lives, and it becomes more spiritual, as in it's not just physical, it's not just mental, but it's also emotional and reflective, and thinking about the important things in life, the important things, what are you really doing? What's the meaning of it all? And by this time you've got into a pattern, so you realise that you can do away with a lot of things which before you might have thought you really needed. It's interesting, So this is not necessarily one thing, then the other. It could all happen at the one time, or sometimes you can have all 3 happening at different stages of different parts of your life. So it's different.
You also, I thought you kind of start living in the moment. so that you're walking along and you're concentrating on the crunch of the stones under your feet. You look up and you see light through the trees. You hear the cuckoo, for example. We'd never heard a cuckoo in our lives, and all of a sudden there was the one in the morning and the one in the afternoon. And that sort of puts you on a different plane so that you're not focusing on your blisters anymore. You're not focusing on the fact, will I get to the next coffee shop anymore. You kind of still do want your coffee, but you're not concentrating on it. You're more into, oh, that's a beautiful flower. And, I think I saw a squirrel or something. Like, it's like you're kind of living in the moment, and I suppose that gets you a bit closer to reflecting and being spiritual along the way. It's not necessarily a religious thing. Some people do feel that, but I found that it was more a discovery of what was around me and getting more in contact with that, or being more in touch with what Bill said was really important in your life.
Yeah.
And I don't always associate that with religion. I associate that more with a sort of a reflective spirituality.
Yes. And it's almost the process that enables you to then get into that place.
That's right.
Yeah, which sometimes I guess is, can be quite repetitive or seemingly monotonous, but we almost need that to get us to the place where we're free from the distraction of, because we are so distracted, aren't we? There's so much to distract us. I noticed that, just in the ordinariness of life.
One thing I found last when we did the Camino recently was, when you're in your normal day, you've got a list of things you've got to do and all that. Yep. And then someone in the evening who wasn't on the Camino said, oh, you guys, I hear you guys had a really busy day today. I said, oh, well, we didn't actually. we walked 22 kilometres, which is a long way, but all we had to do was walk. And so it's just focusing on the walk, on the moment, and reflecting on life. But you don't have this huge list of things that you've got to get done, and there's something quite liberating almost about that, isn't there?
And a pattern develops. I don't know whether you notice it, but there's a pattern where you get up, you get dressed, you pack your bag, you're ready for the day, you go down, you have breakfast, and then you're off. And that's it. That's all you need for the morning.
You don't actually have that many clothes with you, so you don't need to worry about too many other things, do you?
Exactly.
Yeah. So after that first one, you did another one in Europe, Portuguese one?
The Portuguese Camino, which went again. I thought we were going from Porto, but... Where did we go from?
Lisbon.
So we went from Lisbon up. And that was interesting because the previous one we'd used a company, and I think that's a really good idea to use a company to organise things, to carry bags and all the rest. But for our second one, we organised it ourselves.
Well, you're a bit of a veteran after 44 days. Come on.
That's a nice way to put it.
That's a very nice way to put it. Yeah.
So you still end up in the same place. So that these are all leading to the same town.
It did.
But from different starting points.
That's right. Yeah.
And how long was that one through Portugal?
Well, I think it was 38 or something like
38.
that. When we got there, we stayed there for 2 days.
And what did we do?
We went on to Finisterre, which is...
Another 100 kilometres.
100 kilometres, yeah.
That one was too short, first.
Just did a wee walk before the walk.
So after we finished, we got there and then we walked there. There was a street that we saw. What was it? The road.
The Calle de Tre Pazzi, which loosely translate the road of the three mad people. We just needed it.
You just needed it.
And we thought that was ideal because I think on about day 25 or so, you do start to go a bit crazy. Our daughter, our youngest, she organised some music for us and we didn't know what was on it. And so we'd just play it and we started dancing and and anyone looking at us would say,
"Bad,
definitely Patsy."
Because what did your 4 children think about these very long trips to do the Caminos.
Yeah.
Did they think you were a bit crazy at the beginning?
No, but my brother did.
That's right.
All the gear and no idea, I think, was the phrase that was used. But no, they were very supportive, the kids, actually. They were really
I think they were pretty
good.
proud of you.
Oh,
I
they
think
are.
so, yeah.
Yeah, they still are, which is terrific, very much so.
Today's episode is brought to you by Impact Society. Impact Society is a company focused on helping everyday managers become world-changing leaders. They provide straightforward and stylish tools, training and content to elevate leadership skills and mindsets and to help leaders thrive in work and in life. Impact Society has a new product that's just coming out, which is called Random Acts of Leadership, and it's a pack of cards, like a pack of playing cards, and on each of the 52 cards is a different little act of leadership to do every day. So the hope with these cards is to inspire small daily acts of leadership with big impact. So each card has a leadership action to do and then watch the positive ripple effects with your team. And they foster a culture of trust, of openness and growth. The reason I really like these cards is they're something a little bit different. They're fun, they're easy, and they've got small actionable things to do every day. And they make fantastic gifts for the office as well. So for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount on these leadership cards. You just need to go to impactsociety.co, and when you order the leadership cards, put in a discount code which is double D's, so DOUBLEDS, and then you'll get your 20% discount. And then when you receive the cards, let us know on Instagram in a message at Double D's Discovery Diaries on Instagram. Let us know any impacts and fun stories that you have with using these cards, and we look forward to you enjoying them and letting us know how they've positively impacted you. Now, the third one, which is my favourite one, which is why I wanted to dwell a little bit on this one. So this one,
you spent some time in Le Puy.
Yeah, so this started in the middle of France in Le Puy-en-Velay, which is where I spent 6 months when I was 17 as an exchange student. And Bill and Pina are the only Australian people I've met who've actually been to that town. So that was quite exciting hearing about that. So you started there, which is a very beautiful town.
Beautiful.
And a big cathedral. And that's apparently where the original Camino
That's right, the bishop
started.
from there.
So what was the story with that, Bill?
About 900 and something, 930 and 9. So the bishop decided that he would go and visit the tomb of St. James. So he got together a party, and it was the first, I suppose, official Camino. So he got a group, and they spent a few weeks going across and doing this pilgrimage across to the tomb of St. James. And when he got there, he came back with the idea of that it would be good for a lot of people to do that pilgrimage. And there were pilgrimages before, but this one was the main one to St. James.
So the remains of St. James are in the town, and that's why people do that.
Yeah, that's why people.
Why the Camino started in the first place, to go and look at the remains.
So whenever in the Gospels, often Jesus is with Peter, James and John. So Peter's in Rome, James is in Santiago, which is Santiago is St. James in Spanish.
Right,
right.
I see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's good.
Fantastic. So with the one that started in France, that was
very tough.
That was that 50 days? Did you say?
40-something, 46 or so, but it was.
We broke it up because from Le Puy to Santiago is, I think, a total of over 1,500 kilometres.
Yes.
So most Europeans are very sensible. They'll do 2 or 3.
Not so mad.
2 or 3 weeks at a time.
Right.
So they'll do 2 weeks one year, then they might have a year off, and they will do the whole 1,500 plus kilometres. What a lot of foreigners do, and the French kind of get a little bit, thinking about it, is that they do the Spanish part of it first, which is the end part, and then they hear about Le Puy-en-Velay and they go back and do the first part, which is what we did. So the whole lot is over 1,500 kilometres, and So and Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is like the halfway mark of this long journey.
And so that's where you walked to.
We walked it there, but then we wanted to finish
in Santiago.
So our son, you were asking before about how the children found it. Our son Daniel, our second oldest, he was keen to do some of it. So what we did was we agreed to meet at a place called Orense, which is just southeast of Santiago. And we met him there. It's about 120 kilometres outside of Santiago. He's much fitter than us. He's done half marathons and other things. And he helped us, we walked from there all the way into Santiago.
Oh, that would have been fantastic. It
was great sharing it. Yeah, really good.
Yeah. Now, I think it would be very interesting to hear. I have heard this myself, but for others, about a typical day when you were walking through France. And I think you said you did about 15 kilometres on a typical day.
Yeah, it varied a lot. It would always depend on the towns. So if the towns were further apart and there was no accommodation, then you'd have to walk further.
Okay.
As much as you might not want to walk 15, if you wouldn't want to walk 20 or 22 or even 24, nonetheless, if the towns were that far apart, you'd have to do it.
Now, did it also depend on the quality of the boulangerie? Did it?
The bread in France, honestly, is there anything better?
That's why I was very interested when you told me a typical day, and so because it usually involved stopping at coffee shops. And things.
A typical day in the last one was getting up, and if generally you got a really good breakfast with your host.
Which was all fresh bread and baguettes.
Fresh bread, croissants, sometimes cheese, homemade jams, what looked like the freshest butter you could ever like, and just either tea or coffee. So the coffee, to my taste, wasn't strong enough, but it was fine. I didn't mind. Then it was, get your poles, get your boots on, make sure you got your backpack, and head for the boulangerie. And the boulangerie would have what they call sandwich, but actually it was a really long baguette with either prosciutto or jamon cru, or jamon, plain jamon.
Jambon, yeah.
With fromage.
Yep.
And so I'd get one of those, and then of course there'd be a nice pastry as well. And I was intrigued.
It's compulsory.
Of course.
Compulsory.
Like, you can't not have one of those. And I was intrigued by the names. One was
the circular one, yes.
Circular one with a cross on it, and another, I forget the other one, but they were just amazing pastries. So I would get one of those and put it in the backpack and then start walking, and at about 2 hours later
we'd stop.
And sometimes you've done 2 or 3 times going up a hill and down the hill, up a hill, down the hill. Stop, try to find a nice place to sit. A lot of the French people knew exactly where the picnic spots were. So you'd walk into someone's field, sit down and have your morning tea, your little pastry, then walk another 2 hours or so and find another little nook somewhere in the forest on a log, break the baguette in half and share that, and then walk another couple of hours. It was I never found it really easy walking because there were a lot of uphills, and even though we didn't get rained on a lot, we did get rained on, but not a lot. There were a lot of muddy, wet patches that you had to negotiate. So there was sometimes there were rocks to climb over, but a lot of the times you had to walk along the edges, or the ditch was so deep that you had to put your feet either side of them so that you wouldn't slip into the water that was running down the ridge, because most of them were up, sort of coming down.
So full walking boots, you got scarpers or something on, and you've got all the weather gear.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're carrying your pack of
not very heavy pack because
we started off
with a heavy go.
On the first day we thought, we'll walk with our backpacks, so about 7 kilometres and 7 kilograms and 5 or 6 kilograms. But we didn't realise out of Le Puy, as you know, how steep it is, and then we had another 20-something kilometres to go after that. And by the time we got there, we thought, this is the easy bit. On the map it said easy, and the next day was difficult. And we thought, if it's difficult, I don't see how we can do it. So we got a company to take everything, half of our stuff.
Half of our stuff onward, yeah.
And at the end of the day, you'd arrive in a town?
We'd arrive in a town and we'd find our accommodation. If you got there too early, they wouldn't let you in until 4 o'clock or so. If we got there, usually people were really dinner was at 6 or so, and dinner was, always 99% in France. It was different to the other places, but dinner was included, or we always made. We got a half board, and the half board meant that you had a sleep, breakfast, and dinner.
And it'd be a homemade French meal.
It was good. It's funny with duck. I don't usually like duck. And this night, I had no option. It was either duck or starve.
Yeah.
So I said, all right, I'll have the duck. Well, I've never tasted anything like it. It was so good. So from then on, I've always ordered duck. So all through
Turns out
France,
you do like duck.
It was so good, honestly, if you get a chance to have duck in France. The bread and the duck, heaven. Wonderful.
That's brilliant. And Bill, you did tell me a story about when you lost your wallet, and I thought this was a very it was an example of what seemed to encompass the Camino spirit. So can you tell us the story about when you lost your wallet on the track and what happened?
Yes, this was on the Portuguese Camino, and we were about 10 kilometres out of town, and we'd just left one place about 5 kilometres behind. And unbeknown to me, I dropped my wallet, and it was somewhere in the previous 10 kilometres. So I got to the next town and I didn't even realise I'd lost it.
Until you had to pay for our coffee.
And I had to pay for the coffees, and I went to get my wallet and I thought, oh, no, I've lost it. Where could it be? And I realised that somewhere in the previous 10 kilometres my wallet was. So I thought, how can I get in contact with people? So we were in a group, and there's groups on Facebook, and one of them is the Portuguese Camino group. So we sat down on the side of the footpath and we typed in a little message. If anyone is coming between this town and this town, keep an eye out and see if you can find my wallet. Chances were Buckley's and none, I thought, because it was pretty rough. It was a narrow, and we'd gone off the track a little bit. Anyhow, about, how long after? About half an hour later, up popped, we stopped for a coffee, as we often did.
Who paid for the coffee? You paid.
Pina.
I
had money.
Thank goodness. And about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour later, we get this message. Oh, is this your wallet? And what had happened is a number of bikes were going past and he had to get off the track. So he got off the track, and when he got off the track, he looked down and there was a wallet. Just surprising. And so he picked it up, and I had a card in there with my name on it. And he wrote back to say, I'm going to be staying at this hotel tonight. Maybe you can come around at 5 o'clock and I'll be there and you can pick it up. So that's what happened.
The strange thing was that when we wrote the message, we were sitting outside that hotel where he was staying.
That's right.
There you go.
That's right. It was amazing.
It just goes to show that sort of solidarity and
That's
everything
right.
that you were saying.
But the thing is, I still follow him on Facebook, and we're still friends on Facebook.
Do you want to give him a shout out? He might listen to the podcast.
Exactly. Well, he's in Italy. He just moved to Italy. He lives in Mexico. So he's American living in Mexico. So, yeah,
What's his name?
Carl,
that's right.
Carl.
Sorry.
Excellent.
We'll put it in the show notes.
That's it. This episode is brought to you by my coaching program about navigating a lifequake. If you've experienced a lifequake, which is a traumatic life event that you are struggling to cope with, then this 9-week coaching program is for you. This is based on a very traumatic workplace-related incident that I had in November 2021, where I was absolutely struggling to cope. Over the months that followed, I documented everything I did to recover, and I've incorporated it into a framework, which is the Stronger Framework. So the program is Navigating a Life Quake, and it's amongst a supportive community, a transformational 9-week coaching program, which includes weekly virtual coaching sessions and lots of other materials. So if you're interested and you can relate to this, for listeners of the Double D's podcast, there's a 20% discount. Go to my personal website, www.donnesbalconyviews.com.au. You can find out more information about this transformational coaching program. And if you put in Double D, so double DS as one word, you can get a 20% discount on the 9-week coaching program. You did these amazing Caminos in Europe, and so recently you've done the Camino in Western Australia, and
yes.
you're both from Melbourne.
Yes.
So you came across to do that.
Yes.
And so what did you find that was different about the one in Western Australia, and what did you enjoy about it?
The thing that I really liked were the people. It was really good, you know. It reminded me a lot of the first one where we were often walking with people and you'd have dinner together, and then next day you'd probably walk again and you'd have dinner. It wasn't intentional there though. It would just happen.
Because we had a group of 24
We had a group of
people.
24 and we started off together and we tended to stay together. So at the end of 24, you know, at the end of the day we were still more or less together.
What about you, Pina?
Yeah, I'd say there are a lot of similarities between this Camino Salvado and our first Camino, because coming out of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, a heap of people just walk together. There's always people around you. Sometimes you're passing the same ones, you know, you're not walking together, but you see the same faces over 3 or 4 days. And some of them you start talking to, others you kind of just acknowledge. And as Bill said, you're almost eating at the same places, not intentionally, but you end up around the same places and you form those bonds. So there was a big similarity there. And the other thing that was really good about this Camino was that I suppose I thought, 7 days is short. You know, how much can you experience a Camino, in 7 days? And yet at the end, on the 7th day, when, you know, they rang the bells as we approached the church, and it was quite emotional, and you kind of felt that same
the same spirit,
sense,
wasn't it?
The same spirit that accompanied us on our previous Caminos. And it just strikes you as, that's not odd, but you kind of hoping that you're going to, relive that, or you're going to experience that, but then you're still surprised if it does, because I think it's a gift that you get when you're walking with people and sharing a lot of the experience with others.
It was very moving when, as you say, when we arrived and one of the monks was ringing the bells and welcomed us and everything.
That's right. Yeah, I was very moved, especially coming up into the chapel and then going into the church. Yeah, it was very moving. Yeah.
And so it's based on Dom Salvado, who was the monk who walked from Perth to New Norcia in, I think it was 1840.
He seemed to have done a lot of walking backwards and forwards.
Yes.
I was reading about him and I thought, my goodness, this man is so strong.
So he formed New Norcia, which is a monastery town, which is still there in Western Australia. There's only 6 monks at the moment.
Yeah, with the Benedictines.
And he was, Benedictine monks, and he seemed to be very caring of the Aboriginal people, and they had a very good bond together. Sounded like things changed, decades
afterwards,
later. But with him, it was good. And so if he ever ran out of money in the monastery at New Norcia, he would walk back to Perth, and he was a very good musician, and he would do concerts and raise money.
People were very eager to listen to him play, and apparently he was excellent.
And he
pianist.
was from a town near Santiago in Spain, wasn't he? He was Spanish.
He was from the town called Tui, Tui, and he lived for a while in the monastery adjacent to the cathedral in Santiago. And I think from the story that we heard was that the religious were banished from
Spain at that time.
And he was exiled in Italy, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said that. And then he ended up coming to Western Australia, which would have been a shock. But it sounded like they did the first Camino to go from Perth to form New Norcia in February, which is the hottest time of year. And it was the Aboriginal people that took pity on them and basically helped them survive by showing them how to find water. So, yeah. The other really interesting thing was I remember you saying, Pina, that there was a lot of wildflowers in France and some of your other Caminos, and there was incredible array of wildflowers on this recent one as well, and orchids. And it reminded me of, if you were just driving on these dirt roads, you wouldn't notice them, but
You'd miss them,
because we were
Especially
walking,
the orchids, yes.
because we were walking and we were keeping our eye out, we just saw these absolutely stunning orchids.
So if you're listening and you're wondering, we're recording this at the beginning of September. So if you're interested in the wildflowers of Western Australia, it's a beautiful time of year for wildflowers.
Yeah. So the church where it starts is called St Joseph's in Subiaco, and they organise 2 trips a year, 2 pilgrimages. We got told we cannot call it a hike; it has to be called a pilgrimage.
I think that's much more accurate.
Yes, it felt that way, didn't it? So the other thing is Pina writes a blog, a daily blog. So you've written it for all of your Caminos, including this most recent one. So tell us a little bit about that.
I started writing when we started training for the first one. So it was, I think my first post was about my boots, my brand new Hoka boots.
2016.
Was it 2016? Oh, okay. It's quite a while back, yeah. And so each day, if we did a trial, like we'd be training, I'd say how we found it, how long it was. And we went across to France and it was pre-Easter, so a couple of the Easter services got a bit of a mention while we were in Paris. And then each day, at the end of each day's walk, I would write how I'd managed to survive, what the overwhelming emotion was for the day, or if I'd met certain interesting people. I didn't try to, invade anyone's privacy. It was more like what effect the walk was having on me. So it's not like, we walked from here to here, we did 10 kilometres, it's all uphill or it's all downhill. It was more like, well, I thought it was going to be easy, but it's incredibly difficult. I thought I'd be able to finish it in 2 hours, but it took me 3. Or it's amazing what the bird life sounds like. So each day, at the end of the day, I would write something, and if I was overly tired, I'd say, "Bill, please help."
You would choose the photos that would go on the blog.
Yeah,
is that right?
I wrote a few. I think,
and you wrote a few,
probably
blogs too.
1 in 10, maybe, or 1 in 20.
Yeah, because I greatly enjoyed. Reading those blogs when we were on the Camino, and they're a very good record. Yeah. So we've mentioned how to contact, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. The address, because you have got so you've got an actual trip in a bus, I think, going along following where St Paul went. That's coming up, and were you going to Turkey, Greece, and
that's right. We. It came up about, 6 weeks ago, just by accident. We sort of were going through, and one of the lecturers on scripture, one of the senior lecturers, was taking a group across to Turkey and Greece, and I went to Israel many years ago, so I was in Israel in 1980 or 1997. Mm-hmm. And I said at the end of it, because it changed the way that I saw a lot of the scriptures, and I'm interested in scripture. And so I thought, gee, it'd be great, wouldn't it, to go and follow St. Paul and then look at the scriptures there. But what happened was every time I tried to go, something would happen. There'd be a revolution or a bombing or something. And so I had to...
A major crisis
or such. So whenever we were in Europe, something would happen and would prevent us from going. So we're hoping, touch wood, that this will be a pleasant trip, yes, and safe.
So it's going to be exciting, and it's going to seem a bit strange not walking all day long.
Yes, it is.
But you do have another Camino planned as well, don't you, for next year?
In the process of planning. We've bought the tickets, so we've got to go. We've bought the plane tickets and we've got the first 3 days planned.
Yeah, but that's a different one, isn't it? It's not going to Santiago.
No, we're going to Rome this time. Next year's a Jubilee year. Mm-hmm. So we thought what we'll do is we'll go to where St. Peter and, of course, St. Paul went through Malta, so we're going to go through Malta. Then we'll go across to Sicily.
Now, Malta rivals Australia for some of the best beaches, in my opinion. When I was in Malta, I also suffered the worst sunburn I've ever had in Malta. But the water, the clarity, amazing, beautiful. But I've got a really burning, important question for you. With all that walking, what did you do when you fell out with each other?
It's a good question. We never fell out. Honestly, you can't afford to fall out. Might have some disagreements, but just they're usually, I thought we should go left. I thought we should go right. And then, yes, inevitably, whichever one we chose, you were right, or I think we've made a mistake.
But there's also a safe distance. Like if either of us were upset or please do not stir me anymore, I cannot abide another uphill. It'll be about, 200 metres or 300 metres between us.
Right. One would start walking faster and one would start walking slower.
You learn very quickly that humour doesn't always work.
Because I would imagine you
downhill from now on.
Yeah, because I'd imagine you'd have ups and downs just generally anyway. Yeah. So it's just been brilliant hearing. It's like a travelogue, and I think it will inspire people. I know that I'm already thinking, wouldn't mind doing a Camino in Europe. So what would you say to other people who maybe aren't super fit like you weren't at the beginning, and who might want to be thinking about it but haven't actually done anything about it yet?
Yeah. I think it's really important that you get the right gear. So it's so important that you, for instance, correct shoes or boots, and the socks, really important, that you get wool and that it's going to wick, keep the moisture away from you. The same with your shirts and, clothing generally.
Chafing is a really important thing to consider.
Yeah, chafing.
Yeah.
The
in
number
all
of
the
people,
places.
Yeah, and go slow, really go slow. The number of people especially on our first Camino going across the Pyrenees, the number of people who just blitzed us, in the first 2 or 3 days. And then about day 5 or 6, it was terrible. You'd see them
hobbling.
Either splints, shin splints or
so it's a real tortoise in the hare sort of.
Yeah.
Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah, we average about 4 kilometres an hour, but when we're going uphill it can go down to 1 or 2. It's really shocking. But, we'd come into villages sometimes and we'd be 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The others had all got in at 2. And often they would clap.
Fantastic.
Because,
the other thing I'd say though is that I know that I can put one foot in front of the other. I know I can walk. I know I can't walk fast, but I know that if I take my time, I can finish. So it's kind of, you have to almost start with a belief that you can
belief in yourself.
Do something in a certain period of time. I wasn't thinking of 1,000 kilometres. I wasn't thinking about I can do 900 kilometres. The story before about, starting at Sarria or starting at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, to me were equally as impossible when I wasn't fit. And even when I did get fit, I'm thinking, well, I can only do 1 day at a time. And that's, I think, what can maybe encourage people who aren't super fit, that if I can do this bit, and I know I can, no one else can tell me that I can't do the next bit. And then we consulted our doctors. We did sort of say, look, not am I fit enough, but just say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And the doctor's encouraging, well, you're not running a marathon, you're doing a bit at a time. Then we consulted the podiatrist to see that we were walking okay and asked about how do we look after our blisters if we get them. He goes, don't get any. That's
right.
Which is where the shoes and the socks
and that's where
come
the
into
shoes
hand.
and the socks come in handy, and what to do if you do end up with a blister, not to make it worse. So I think those things were fairly important. Now, the training is important, but the wisdom of others is don't do the Camino before you do the Camino. So don't try to walk 800 kilometres and then go. Like, you do have to work on your fitness, and then I think part of the pilgrimage is being able to put faith in the journey, the process.
I love that. Just one step. You know that you actually can put one foot in front of the other. I love that. Yeah.
It's like that journey of 1,000 miles
Starts with the first step.
Single step.
And you can walk for another hour.
That's right.
And then if you just keep thinking that all the way along, you definitely will make it.
On the last week, I think it was
Camino,
on the Camino. I think we got to, it was one section, and I said, I think I'll get on the bus. I'm tired. I've walked, I don't know, it was 15K to lunch or 17, I can't remember which day it was. And either Henry or Rob said, it's 1.5 kilometres or it's 2 kilometres to the next bit where, you're actually stopping. And I thought, hang on, I can do that, even if knowing that I'm tired. Like, I know that's
in me.
That's in me. I've got that much left. Whereas a previous day, I knew that my legs had just got to their limit, and I couldn't ask myself to do another 4 hours or whatever it was.
At the end of our first Camino, we said, we're never going to do this again. It's true.
Famous last words.
That's right.
Now you're up to number 5.
We did it.
Is this the 5th one you're planning?
Something like that. That's what I mean. But
People do say that about childbirth and things like that.
Well, exactly. You had 4 kids, so come on. Well, look, we've loved meeting you. Thanks for all your stories and just for sharing a bit of your experience, and I'm sure it'll inspire others.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening today. We really appreciate you, our listeners. Please like and follow us and share in whatever medium you're on. That really supports us. But we also would love to hear from you if you have a guest that you think would love to share their story. We'd love to do that so that we can get even more stories of courage and resilience out into the world. What I loved, Donna, about meeting Bill and Pina is just how in retirement they just decided to go for it, and they kind of recognised what, they needed to do some training, but it was just that kind of like ignorance is bliss as well, where they had the seed of an idea, but then, actually my favourite bit was when Bill talks about, well, I thought it was about 100 odd kilometres, and then Pina straight away, no, we're going to do the whole thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think we have had a theme recently in our recent podcasts of people just getting these ideas. They might not be young anymore, but they think of things and they actually go and do it, which is pretty inspirational.
It is.
And on the Camino Salvado, in Pina's blog, she wrote something at the end of the Camino, which I thought was really good. I'll read it out. So each Camino has been special. Each Camino has been challenging. Each Camino a significant moment in our life's journey. Buon Camino, fellow pilgrims.
Yeah, so I wonder if we'll get some fellow pilgrims tuning in.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to look up a few more of how you actually go about doing the trails as well.